On this episode of the Contagious Influencers of America podcast, what do you do when your world crumbles around you? Author and personal coach Brandi Wilson shares how she found hope and healing after a very public divorce.
Nothing around me feels good, but I believe that God is still good. So how can I find that goodness around me?
This is CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sams. I'm so excited to have Brandi Wilson here at the homestead today. Her story is one that, deserves to be told. And I wanted you to hear it directly from her because this is something I'm sure it's going to help so many of you who may be going through something very similar right now. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Brandi, she's an author, coach, and a speaker. But where she first stepped out into the public eye was her years that she spent being a pastor's wife, helping build Crosspoint Church in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, it's a mega church serving thousands of people in the Middle Tennessee area. Her ex-husband was the lead pastor for years and years, but in 2016, he decided to walk away from the church and his marriage. In a blink of an eye, Brandi lost everything. She lost her church community and her identity, but found a way to carry on for her 3 boys. She details it all in her new book, Better Than Okay, Finding Hope and Healing After Your Marriage Ends. Here's my interview with Brandi Wilson. First of all, Brandi, welcome, but I have to tell you, I'm really ticked off.
Tell me why.
You did this book for women. I've lived this story. Everybody in this room knows it.
It's so interesting because I actually asked about that in the writing of it because I've talked to a lot of men as well.
Right.
But it seems like the audience who mainly buys books these days are female driven. So yeah, I kind of wrote more to a female audience, but I do feel like it can all transfer. I will tell you, my 22-year-old son just finished this book within the last 4 to 6 weeks, and he called me and said, there is such nuggets in this dating chapter I'm going to start using. And I was like, okay. Yeah. It felt a little awkward, but the fact that he took something away from it was great.
Well, I totally identified with it because you were in a highly visible public arena divorce, as was I in Los Angeles. My wife, who left me, was a news anchor, so you can imagine. Yeah. So I want to hear your story. We're not here to talk about mine. So tell me what inspired this book to begin with.
Yeah. As you said, the book is inspired out of the life that I lived. And back in 2016, my husband at the time, we had started a church. We actually started the church back in 2022. No, we actually started the church back in 2002. My oldest son was 1 here in Nashville. It's called Crosspoint Church and had been there for 14 years and loved it. It was a vibrant, growing church. I loved being able to be the senior pastor's wife. I loved loving on the staff. I loved, being there on Sunday mornings, hugging people, shaking hands, kind of being the chief cheerleader of the staff in the church. And in 2016, my husband chose to walk away from that. And he walked away from the church and the ministry and our marriage and the family unit that we had created. And life as I knew it fell apart overnight. And I do think, David, we could probably agree that when your life publicly falls apart, it's been falling apart behind the scenes for a while.
Right.
So while things had been rocky for a while, I never foresaw the fact that it would fall apart at this level. And life as I knew it ended. And I had to start over. And I did not know what that looked like. I didn't know how I was going to support my family. I didn't know how I was going to purchase a house as a single mom. I didn't know what job I was going to, work in order to pay the bills. I didn't know if I would, your mind goes, it can go crazy during those situations. I'm like, maybe I'll die old and lonely with lots of cats. You just never know. So the slate was blank and I got to start over. And I think the most important thing I learned is that when your life falls apart, you have control of putting the pieces of your life back together the way you want. So that's what I chose to do. And I just took how I put the pieces of my life back together and poured it into the book. So it covers everything from parenting to loneliness to dating again, to grief and shame. It covers how you begin to dream again when you feel like all of your dreams have been dashed.
But paint for me that picture. I know for me, I went through a major 8 months of not caring. My world fell apart.
Yeah.
I stared at the wall.
Yeah.
It was very dark. And if I didn't have my family and a couple of close friends around me, I probably wouldn't be here today. But I had 2 kids, and that kept me going. But when you went through that period, what was that like? Paint the picture for us, because I know there are a lot of people going through that right now.
Yeah, that piece of it being public is just devastating. And, let's be honest, divorce is public for everyone at some level, whether it's a neighborhood, whether it's, your community of friends, whether it's your church. For me, because my ex-husband pastored the largest church in Middle Tennessee, it was very public. So it was in the Tennessean, it was on, the news station. And then I have these children who, the entire church knew that he had resigned before our children knew. So everything just felt like it was coming at me. So I really shrunk life down. I went from being surrounded by thousands of people every weekend to I had 3 or 4 people I talked to, 3 of those being friends and one of them being my therapist. And I would legitimately, I have 3 sons, you had children. That's kind of what kept me going. I'd have to get up, get them to school, come back home. I'd pull straight in the garage, close the door, go up to the 2nd floor of the house. So if anyone came to my door, they couldn't see through the window that I was at home. And I would just kind of shut down for the day. Now, physically shut down. Mentally, your mind's in overdrive. But physically, it was just like I couldn't take being outside. I remember at one point, the weekend after he resigned, I went to the Kroger closest to my house and I had on a hoodie and I put my hood on because I did not want, even though a lot of people were coming up to check on me and be kind, I still didn't want to have to give any kind of answer to what was going on because I myself didn't have an answer at that point. It was very lonely.
So how did you get to the other side of that? What happened? I mean, obviously, I know therapy played a big role and continues to this day. But how did you get to the other side of that?
Yeah, well, one day at a time. I think there was a point where I recognized as long as I focused on trying to figure out what kind of house we would live in 6 months, or what would my life look like in 6 years when one of my sons went to college, that as long as I kept the future as my focus, then I became overwhelmed and life just, it was not a full life that I dreamed about living. So I just took life one day at a time and I really focused on, okay, God, what do I need to do today? What are the conversations I need to have? What are the phone calls I need to make? What are the meals that need to be provided? And I focused on one 24-hour period at a time. And when I got through that, then I was like, okay, I did it. I made one day. Now it's a second day. So I really broke life down into one day at a time. And then I also adopted something that is super easy and practical. But I started a huge gratitude practice in my life because I knew that nothing around me felt good. Nothing felt good. Anywhere I looked, I didn't have answers to these questions. I was lonely. Life had fallen apart, and I'm trying to parent my kids and walk them through their tragedy and trauma. So I ended up thinking nothing around me feels good, but I believe that God is still good. So how can I find that goodness around me? So I took a little simple journal that somebody had sent me in the mail, pulled it off the shelf, took an orange Sharpie and wrote focus on the good on the front. And I made myself every day write 5 or 6 things that felt good around me. At the time, I don't even think I knew it was gratitude. At the time, I was just trying to pick out some good moments of my day. And it was everything from, I had ice cream on the porch tonight with my kids to I got a new hair dryer. And while a hair dryer might not seem significant, it is for girls, David. Hair dryers are very significant. It meant that there would be new things in my life. There were new things to come. So I really leaned into just finding good around me, and in doing that, engaging with life in a healthier way.
So you started a gratitude practice. I started an attitude practice.
Oh,
is that a male-female thing? I mean, how do you get to the point of gratitude? Because I was in shock. I was pissed off. I felt betrayed. I felt like my whole world was crumbling. I can't imagine going I can't imagine getting into a gratitude practice.
Yeah.
So, I think most people probably feel like I felt.
I felt that.
Okay. So
I felt all of those things.
How do you get to the gratitude stage?
Yeah. Well, I knew that I did not want to be defined by what had happened to me. I honestly, one of the things that I hated, well, one, I never thought I would go through a divorce. Two, I hated being described as the divorced pastor's wife. I hated that. And I got to a point where I think I realized that that doesn't have to be my reality. But I felt all the emotions you're feeling. I felt devastation. I was mad. I was mad at God. I was mad that this is where my life was. I was ticked off that my kids were having to walk through something, that someone else's choices were impacting my kids for the rest of their lives. I was really angry. I had to share my kids every other weekend. Like my kids would get in that car with him to leave for the weekend, and I'd close the front door and I'd cuss up and down because I was so mad that someone else had made decisions that impacted how I got to parent my children. Because you don't walk down the aisle thinking like, you know, I'm going to have to divide all of these gifts one day, 50-50, and you get the blender and I get the microwave. That's never something that we foresee when we get married. I felt all of those emotions. And getting to that point of gratitude was not necessarily easy, but I just refused to be defined by what had happened to me. So I knew it was okay for me to feel bitter. It was not okay for me to live my life bitter. I knew it was okay for me to feel angry and manipulated. I did not want to live my life out of that anger and manipulation. I believed that my ex-husband, had already taken so much away from me, I wasn't going to give him anything else. So how can I recreate this life and put it back together the way I wanted to? One of the things I said to my kids when they were younger is, are you being grumbly, hateful, or humbly grateful? Which is just one of those phrases you want them to like snap back into gratitude. So there's a point where I'm like, I have to practice that for myself. I can be grumbly, hateful. That's really easy, honestly. But how can I be humbly grateful that even though all of this has happened in my life and feels like a total cluster of crazy and chaos and manipulation and hurt and deceit, how can I move forward from that? Because I didn't want to continue to live my life back there. I wanted to move forward in what God had for me.
How did you handle all this with the kids? I know for me, my girls were very young, and they have one mom, one dad, and I at one point I said one thing about their mom, and I saw them tear up, and that was the only time in their childhood that I ever said anything after that negative about their mom.
Yeah,
because I just knew it was going to cause great damage, right?
Yeah.
But how did you manage that? Because you just want to say everything that's on your mind.
Yeah.
How did you manage it?
Yeah, my kids were young too. The separation happened, they were in 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 8th grade. So I have everything from teenager to elementary school. And I think how I handled it then and how I handle it now has obviously evolved. One of the things I felt very clear on is that if I believed that God could take my story and give it purpose, if God could take my suffering and help me create a survival guide for others, if he could take my pain and give it purpose, then I had to believe that he would also do that in my kid's life. And I'm not saying that means something in their future is going to be, purpose because of the divorce. But I do think that God is going to bring something good out of their pain. So I remember, this is when I was still separated. So this is super early on, having a quiet time in the morning. I was reading in Joshua where the Israelites are crossing the Jordan. We're all super familiar with that passage. I'd read it a ton of times. Honestly, started reading that morning as like, okay, I know this story. I've done it on the flannel graph since I was in Sunday school. But when I was reading the story that day, it hit me a little differently, because what I realized is, the Jordan, or the Israelites get to the Jordan, it's at flood stage. So it is like very deep and very wide. And they have been, 40 years roaming around. The promised land is on the other side, and they get to the Jordan and it's at flood stage. And the Bible says that God piled the water up in a heap. Which makes me think of laundry. I don't know about you, but there's always a heap of laundry somewhere. But this was not a heap of laundry. This heap was a barrier. It was a protection for the Israelites. So as soon as that first foot stepped into the Jordan, the water piled up in a heap. And it says that they carried the Ark of the Covenant to the center of the Jordan. They stood on dry ground. And then all of the Israelites, and it was close to 1 million, passed around them to the promised land. And what I realized when I was reading that passage is that I thought I had to do it all. So I had to be the one to take the first step into the Jordan. I had to be the one to hold back the water. I had to be the one to carry the Ark of the Covenant to the center. I had to be the one to lead my kids to the promised land. And I'm doing it all by myself. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. Your kids are the one things you don't want to mess up. Like, I knew I wasn't going to get everything right, but man, you want to get as much right as you can with your kids. And I just felt God saying to me, like, Brandi, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're actually doing my job. My job is to lead your kids to the Jordan. My job is to hold back the water. My job is to lead them across on solid ground to the promises I have for their life. Your job is to stand on solid ground and hold me. Your job is to stand on solid ground and allow them to see you have a relationship with me. Your job is to stand on solid ground and make sure that they know who I am in your life. And at that point, I just felt this overwhelming truth that I might be a single mom, but I was not parenting alone. So to know that I wasn't in this alone was huge for me. So I think from that point on, not that it's been easy, we've had lots of bumps, but I always try to go back to the fact of, if I believe God's truth for my life and how he's worked in my life, I have to believe he's going to do the same thing in my boys' lives as well.
Hi, I'm Jackie Dorman. Are you longing for your soulmate? And maybe you've tried everything and you feel like nothing's working. You've done the online dating, the singles ministry, possibly even the dreaded blind dates set up by well-meaning family and friends. And you're starting to wonder, where are the truly Christian men that want to seek me out for a committed, loving relationship without the head games? Well, I'm here to help. I want you to join me for my free Married in 12 Months challenge, where I am going to show you all the tools you need to step into the love story that God has already written about you. I'm going to teach you about why now is your time, why God wants you married even more than you want to be married, what are the lies that are holding you back, the law of attraction that's biblical, and what are the tools to stepping into that bride that you want to become. So join me at lovestories.com for my free Married in 12 Months challenge, where we'll get you out of the waiting room and into the love story that you've been dreaming of. Join me at lovestories.com. I hope to see you there.
Now let's get back to my interview with Brandi Wilson.
I have an issue, or I've had an issue over the years where you sort of, well, a friend of mine said, get your head out of the land of regret. Stop living in the land of regret, right? Do you ever go there? Do you have flashbacks?
Flashbacks, I think.
Do you ever say, what if, what?
I do. I don't spend a lot of time there. Now, I'm also 6.5 years post-divorce, separated a year before that. So, time kind of helps with that, because I really love the life that I live now. I think for me, there have been some regrets. I tried to be super intentional once he had resigned from the church and I knew that divorce was imminent, I tried to be super intentional at night to when I laid down to think, do I have anything that I regret today? And have I protected my kids the best I could? And those two thoughts kind of kept me focused on what my goal was. I think as far as regrets, I have tried to take those regrets and in therapy, figure out how I can do different the next time. How can I be different in a relationship? How do I notice red flags sooner? I got married at 21. I had been with him since I was 18. So I legitimately grew up married to this person. So that's all I knew. And I think for me, the regrets that I have from that relationship, I actually want to use those to be in a healthier relationship in the future, rather than spending time mulling over the past. Because the reality of the situation is I'd go through that 3 times over to get my kids, to be where I am with the boys. Well, yeah, I would live that all over as many times as I needed to have my sons. So yeah, there's regret. There's probably more regret tied to the church piece of it, and the fact that so many people were impacted by that, than necessarily the way I managed myself in the marriage.
How do you believe in trust again?
Well, I think it takes time, and I think it is slow, and I think healing is a process, and we have to trust that process. I think I heard a therapist say once that trust is time plus believable behavior. Because for me, trust is just such a concept that you can't necessarily grasp onto, that I almost needed a formula to be able to look at a relationship or a person I'm in a relationship with, whether it's a friendship, a business relationship, and even sometimes parenting. Trust is time plus believable behavior. So what's the longevity of the relationship, and have their actions supported what they say about themselves? So that has helped me define trust when I am engaging with other people, because it is a concept that's hard to grasp onto. And I get asked a lot, how will I trust again? Will I ever trust again? And I do think I started trusting with friendships and business relationships in order to realize that, okay, I do have great intuition. I can trust my gut when it comes to people and relationship. So that could lead me into, what does it look like in a romantic relationship?
Let's talk about friendships. What happened to friendships? I mean, I know a lot of couples, when they break up, they lose a lot of friends. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
People take sides, this and that. And what about you? What was your experience, and how have those friendships been redefined over the past 6 years? What's a real friend now?
Yeah. I think you're right. Friendship totally shifts. I'm now the single chick hanging out with a lot of married people most of the time. Friendships did shift for me. I will say life always felt really big when I was married, and the church was big, and there's always commitments, and seasons always felt busy. So for me, post-divorce, my life really shrunk, which I enjoyed. I'm actually an introvert by nature, but super relational, so I value relationship highly. So life shrunk down, as I said earlier, to initially just about 3 or 4 people. And those are the people I talk to on a regular basis. As time went on, that circle has grown, but I kept my nest super tight. It was just the boys and I, and then a couple of friends that I knew that they trusted and I trusted. But I had to start rebuilding a lot of those friendships. Because of the way I'm wired, a lot of my relationships were people that I had done church with. So there were people who were on staff at Crosspoint. They were people who were in the congregation. So it did take a lot of rebuilding there. I think the support system you have when you go through a divorce is the most important thing. Outside of God is obviously first, but your support system and therapy, I would say both of those of equal weight are super important when walking through a divorce. So when my life shrunk, I was allowed to be surrounded by the people who I knew cared about me the most. And I have a best friend who lives in Vegas. She's a pastor's wife. She's the person I do nonprofit work with now. She'd been in my life for about 10 years at that point, and friendship, looked different because she's in Vegas and I'm in Nashville. So how can we be close? And she called me every single day and would say, I just need to hear your voice. And there were times we would talk for 5 minutes, and there were times we talked for 3 hours. But I made sure that I had healthy connection with someone in my life on a daily basis outside of my children. As far as moving forward in friendship now, I love that my circle is smaller. I think for me, because I'm relational, I have to be in healthy relationship with people. That's when I feel most alive. That's connectedness is huge for me. I think there's part of people who hold your story, and there are people who hear your story. So now 6 years post-divorce, I look back on my friend in Vegas. She held my story. She walked through every day of that event with me. Now I meet people, I coach people, and those people hear my story. And my story brings value to them because maybe they're walking through something similar, or maybe there's some kind of tagline I say that they can apply to their life, or some kind of practice that they can take into, their routine. But I have a lot of value for those people who are there to hold my story, and continue relationship with them today. So I think those friendships were key, and leaning into those friendships are what helped get me to the point I am today. Most of those friends did not live in Nashville when this happened. One of them was in Vegas. One of them was in Florida. I had one friend here in Nashville I was talking to on a regular basis. My kid's babysitter I talked to on a regular basis. She now was allowed to come into the nest. Mm-hmm. And then I had my therapist. And those 4 people were really it. And the further I got from it, the more healing I felt. I could engage in relationship more. But I still felt pretty protected in sharing my story. Just because I didn't want to speak out of my wounds. I wanted to speak out of scars. I didn't want to be the type of person who blew everything up verbally when I knew I didn't have answers to a lot of the questions. So it was key for me to keep that nest tight, so I knew that I was processing with super safe people.
Let's talk about social media because, like you said, everybody has to deal when going through a divorce now. Social media, whether it's whether you got 50 friends or 5,000 friends on Facebook. How did you deal with, manage social media, and how did your kids deal with social media during this period?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's social media is such a
I know, but I mean, when you go through something like this now, it's something you got to deal with.
Yeah, I shut down and didn't do anything for a year on social media. I didn't have any kind of announcement. I didn't have, I think at some point during the course of the separation, moving toward divorce, there was a Facebook announcement made. That's probably one of the things I regret if we talk about that. My attorney was not happy about it. David, you can only imagine. But I shut down social media for a year. I didn't want to see what people were saying. I didn't want to post anything. I didn't want any questions. So I just walked away from it and didn't necessarily miss it.
And you never peeked?
No, I didn't
Really?
have it on my phone. Yeah,
Okay.
I just didn't, and what was hard is that work is social media. You have to do social media through the job I have. So like, how do I keep that balance? And, because I work with people who care about me, they gave me the space to do that. So yeah, it was the 1 year mark before I came back to social media and actually really enjoyed the break. I think now I'm always really careful with how I say things, even though I feel like my kids understand the truth of the situation and what happened. I always also try to be respectful to language I use so that it's not embarrassing or, kicks up something for them. I try to really lean toward talking about my story and my growth. So it's not like what happened to end my marriage. It's what did God choose to do through me when my marriage ended.
Let's spend a little time talking about the importance of therapy.
Yeah.
And the role that therapy played and continues to play in your life.
Yeah, therapy is huge for me still. I have done one-on-one individual therapy for 7-8 years. I've been with the same therapist. I also did an intensive at a center here in Nashville, outside of Nashville in Cumberland Furnace called On-Site. I did their Living Centered program for a week, which is a therapy intensive. Therapy for me is huge in order to make sure that I don't repeat what I've gone through in the past. So we all have habits, we all have baggage at our age when, you're in your 40s and you start dating again, you realize everyone has baggage. Am I going to choose to deal with that baggage? So I knew that what I didn't repair, I would repeat. So I wanted to make sure that if I was going to engage in relationship, again, I had done the work to make sure that it was a healthy relationship, healthy for me, healthy for that individual, and then healthy together. One of the things that was said to me at therapy, at on-site, a therapist, Dr. Bill Loki, who has since passed, said on very early into that week, your child's resilience is directly connected to how their parent owns their story, understands their story, and communicates their story. So I will tell you that initially I would say I got into therapy for my children because I wanted to be a healthy version of myself to parent them. But upon hearing that, I realized unless I take care of myself, that's the biggest way I can impact them. I have to learn to own my story, understand my story, and communicate my story, which, you know, that's a lot of work you have to do to uncover those layers. And I'd been married for 20 years. So together for 23, dated for 3, married for 20. I had a lot of bad habits that had been created, things I had allowed that weren't healthy. You often don't realize that dysfunction until you're away from it. I look back now and see tons of dysfunction that I just thought was normal because that's all I knew. But being able to walk through therapy and know that my goal was to own my story, understand my story, and communicate my story really helped me make sure that I was digging into myself. I'm not just doing this for my kids. I'm not just doing it for the next relationship. But if I don't repair this, then I'll repeat it. And an emotionally stronger me creates an emotionally stronger we. So whether that's a relationship with me and my kids, me and my girlfriends, a relationship at work, or maybe a romantic relationship one day, an emotionally stronger me creates an emotionally stronger we. And that's the type of life that I want to live.
So for someone listening to this right now, what would you recommend they look for in a therapist?
Well, you know, I think one thing that is important about therapy is that it's just like life. You know, we don't always find a great fit the first time. It's kind of like if I went to a restaurant and had a bad meal, I'm not going to give up eating out. I'm just not going to go back to that restaurant. So don't give up if you don't have a great experience with your first therapist. I think one of the best ways to find a therapist is word of mouth. And then I'd ask your friends, lean into friends, call your church. Lots of times churches have counseling facilities that they are associated with. So start there, start by asking at church, ask some friends, see who they use. And then there's always, you know, the resource of being able to get online, the Association of Christian Counselors, find a counselor that way in your area. And then there are lots of great online options now. Since the pandemic, we can get lots of great care online. So I think checking out what you can find online is also huge. But I do think finding a therapist you click with is key because you want your life moving forward to look different than it did in the past.
So have you started dating again?
I have dated. I've done lots of first dates. Not quite as many second dates. Dating, I think married people like to describe dating as fun. I don't know that I would use that word. But yes.
Any horror stories?
Well, yeah, I don't think I can say those on the radio. But yes, there have been, you know, nothing like where I felt unsafe. More things I could laugh about with my girlfriends at, you know, tacos that week. But dating is just interesting. I would definitely desire to be in a relationship again. I've had a relationship that lasted a little over a year that was wonderful. Wonderful person. Just the timing was kind of off between us. I'm not currently dating right now, but yeah, I hope to date again. But dating, I think the thing about dating is we walk into dating and our thought is, will they like me? And that's not where our thought process needs to be when we're dating. Our thought process needs to be, do I like them? Because we spend so much time wondering if they'll like us that we're not even getting to know them. So I think I got to the point when I was trying a bunch of first dates just to kind of prove to myself that, you know, I can carry on conversation with a stranger and I'm secure in who I am, all of that stuff. Before I'd open the door to walk into the restaurant, I would be like, Brandi, do you know how lucky they are to spend the next hour with you? And legitimately say that to myself, to walk in there with my head held high, just knowing that, gosh, I'm a great person. So whether there's anything sparks that fly or there's a second date, I get to have a conversation with someone who's interesting and they get to have a conversation with someone who's interesting. And I think there was a point where I was like, this is me practicing what it's like to get to know someone else. And that kind of takes the pressure off. I think we want dating to be a quick fix. And that's where I feel like, it goes back to, if we don't repair it, we're going to repeat it. So jumping into a relationship too soon post-divorce is not going to heal you. In fact, it could probably do more damage. So I think everybody has to figure out, what is their timeline for dating? When are they ready? I probably dated too soon, but I needed to prove to myself, I'd been so rejected and abandoned. I needed to prove to myself that, that was not the reality of life. So I might have dated too soon. No major regrets when it comes to dating. I think there is a point where I had to realize, when I was in that relationship for a year, that I wanted to choose family first dating. And so did he. We were both very agreed on that. I have 3 children. He had 2, and full-time jobs, and between running, to practices and orthodontics appointments and cooking dinner and just life, that, to make sure that we were both doing family first dating actually created some healthy boundaries, because we couldn't dive in and be together, 24/7, because we both had lives that we needed to continue living. So I think that's probably, being in a relationship post-divorce, that was probably my biggest takeaway at the time, is that family first dating is the way I wanted to do it. I was very slow to introduce my kids to anyone. They, in fact, did not meet anyone until I'd been divorced 5 years. And they met the one gentleman that I'm talking about. But I just wanted to make sure that, now my kids knew I went on dates. I think honesty is key, especially when you come from a lot of deceits and lie and manipulation. So my kids would know I went on dates. But I didn't process that with them. I didn't tell them about it. But I would say, yeah, I'm going to meet my friend Chris for dinner. And it was kind of left at that. Because they trusted me, and they knew if there's anything else they needed to know, I would tell them.
And I got to ask you the obvious question. Have you been able to forgive the ex?
I think in a way, I think forgiveness is one of those things that there are layers to it. I feel like when forgiveness is given too early on, it's cheap forgiveness, and I did not want that to be the case. What I will tell you in a situation like mine is that forgiveness kind of has to happen over and over and over. So there might be, yes, I've forgiven for what happened 6 years ago, but I might still be working on what happened last summer. So I think when because you're parenting together, and co-parenting is not easy. I'm sure you're aware of that. Co-parenting is not easy. Co-parenting has not been easy in my story, continues to not always be easy. Even as the kids are getting older, it's gotten better. So I think there are things that happen along the way. You're still having to engage with that person at a certain level, and they're a person who hurt you, and odds are they're going to probably hurt you again. So I feel like, yeah, I can forgive for things that happened long ago. Maybe I'm still figuring out how to forgive for some of the more recent stuff.
Well, I've been. Let me see. I just got remarried a few months ago.
Congratulations!
But I'm still working on the forgiveness thing with the ex, because, like you said, it's a process. And when you have kids, and you think it's going to be all okay once they turn 18 or whatever. Well, life goes on, right?
Yeah. There's still tuition you have to decide, and insurance,
all kinds of stuff.
All of that kind of stuff. Yes.
Well, Brandi, thank you so much for joining me. This has been enlightening,
you,
and
Dave.
it's been wonderful
pleasure.
having this conversation.
Thank you.
And I wish
Enjoyed
you much success with your venture and with your new book.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm excited about it.
Thanks again, Brandi. I hope that if you're going through something similar right now, that this has brought you a lot of hope. And also, if you know of somebody else that's gone through something similar, do share this episode with them. Her book, and Brandi's book, is called Better Than Okay, Finding Hope and Healing After Your Marriage Ends. It's available right now wherever your books are sold. This has been CIA, Contagious Influencers of America, from the producers of Keep the Faith, the #1 faith-based show in all of American radio. And please do check out our new website. Oh my gosh, do we have a surprise for you at KeepTheFaith.com. Now, Now, maybe they're there a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago and say, I've already seen it. But no, folks, it is brand new and it is really something to see. Yeah, there's all kinds of goodies, all kinds of music, all kinds of stories, inspiration, things that you can share with your friends to maybe get them out of a bad place. I'm telling you, there's all kinds of goodies over there at KeepTheFaith.com. And I'll let you in on something that we have just launched. It's called the Keep the Faith VIP, that's you, Therapy Plus. That's right. We have launched a therapy service. And by the way, we have something like 30,000 therapists on this network. So you are definitely going to find a variety of people that you can choose from. And it's on at KeepTheFaith.com. What's really great about this is that for years we've been serving up all kinds of inspiration, all kinds of wonderful music and stories. But I've told the team, look, we have got to deliver the tools that people can put into their emotional toolbox. So we worked on this forever and ever. And by the way, there's something really special right now too. We're offering this. It's an introductory offer for the first 3 months, and that is if you sign up, you get it for 50% off for the first 3 months. So do check it out. We've made it so affordable. We made it so just easy. You can do this from your home, privacy of your home. You can do it from your computer, your phone. And there's all kinds of extra goodies that come along with it, including a membership assistance program. I'm not going to keep going on and on. I just wanted you to check this out at KeepTheFaith.com. I'm telling you, KeepTheFaith.com is going to be your favorite website. So please do check it out. And this week, I would love for you to do something. I tell you this on every episode, but I really mean it, especially as we get into the new year and all that. And that is to go out there and live your life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living it in black and white. Okay, let's get out of the black and white mode and make 2024 incredibly colorful. I'm David Sams. This has been CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.